Hard Rocks. It was after dark on Tupper Street. School was out for the summer. I was the new guy, and they didn't know anything about me. We would meet on the corner of Tupper and Prospect Streets, only shadows melting into darkness, where there was a small abandoned building with a gravel parking lot behind it. I was told the building used to be a dairy. We weren't a gang, but I guess it seemed that way. We were just teens who had nothing else to do but hang out together. One kid, the same age but smaller than the rest of us, seemed gutsy. I was always impressed by gutsy little guys, but a couple of older hard rocks, as they were called in Canada, in the States, greasers, and in England, yobs. They came walking by us on their way downtown, and as they passed, our gutsy little guy said, "Rough, rough." I knew who said the stupid thing, but when the big 18-year-old hard rock turned and asked who said, "Rough, rough," I felt the need to protect the little guy, because that's what I always did. So I said, "I did," and quickly received a punch in my face. I stood there, looking at this big hard rock. At the same time, behind me, I could hear my gang members telling me not to fight him and to back off. They were scared for me. I was 15 and smaller, but backing off was not in my wheelhouse, so I did my boxing thing. I paused because we were now in the middle of the road. It was dark, so I said to the hard rock, "We should get back on the sidewalk before we get hit by a car." But he said, "I like it right here." So with him not taking his eyes off me, I walked around him and punched his face back to the sidewalk. He shouted to his small hard rock companion, "I can't take him!" and continued walking down Tupper Street Hill. I turned and saw that all my associate friends were surrounding the little hard rock, and figured they had the situation well in hand, and went up to see what was happening. But then the little hard rock ran through the circle and sucker punched me. There was a downhill slope in the parking lot behind me. I couldn't keep my balance, and I didn't want to fall down, so my legs kept running backwards until I landed on the roof of a doghouse and broke it. The doghouse actually belonged inside a house lot's fence, but for some reason the owner had decided to place it, and I suppose his dog, who at the time was not in the doghouse, outside his fence. I wasn't hurt and wasn't angry. I was always very calm in a fight. I walked back up the slope, but the little hard rock was already running to catch up with his bloody companion. Like I said, I always admired little guys with guts. I think I would have shook his hand and apologized for the whole incident. It was the first time that I was not on the side of right, and I felt ashamed of myself. But later, I thought about bullies I'd encountered. Usually, there was a little guy with him starting a disturbance, and his bully finished it with his fists. They worked as a team, so perhaps this was the case here. Maybe these hard rocks were saving their plans for later, and if so, I gave the bully an attitude adjustment that might have protected someone downtown. I also came to realize that the smaller, gutsy 15-year-old in our so-called gang was probably the same kind of shit disturber who just hadn't found his bully boy yet, so I quit hanging out with the kids on the corner. The next day, I took my new girlfriend into the Tupper Street corner store where they had a soda fountain. I was a bit shy walking into the store with a girlfriend, but it was empty except for the lady behind the soda fountain counter. The soda counter lady had seen me in the store before. I ordered 2 root beer floats. The lady must have already heard about my fight the evening prior, because she said,
"You are such a quiet boy. I never thought of you as a fighter. How did you do it?"
I just made a fist and hit him with it.
Soccer. In grade 8 at Prospect School, I joined the soccer team, and we won the tournament against all the other schools in Port Arthur and Fort William that year, mainly because of a sly plan we made up ourselves. The plan went like this. We had this big kid who was not good at playing soccer, but he had one superpower. He could kick the ball a very long way, so we had that kid play defense, and we all agreed that when the other team kicked the ball towards our goal we would not run after it. Instead we would either stay where we were or run towards the other team's goal. Our kicker wore work boots that may have had steel toes, but no one seemed to notice. If the ball got anywhere near our super kicker, he would kick it long, and we would take over from there. Our plan didn't always work. Other teams would get their share of goals, but we always won the game. Acting. My mother had joined the Community Players, an amateur acting group that put on plays. I was interested in my mother's attempt at acting and wanted to be a part of it, so my mother got me a job helping to paint the stage sets. I was amazed at how, close up, the sets didn't look much like anything, but from a distance they looked almost real. After working on painting sets for a month, my mother told me they were looking for an accordion player to play a gypsy in a restaurant scene, but couldn't find one.
What am I? Chopped liver? I joked. I had a 12-bass accordion that I had mastered well enough for what she was looking for. Next thing you know, I was fitted for a gypsy costume. The pants were a little tight, I thought. We rehearsed the scene, and they told me that when we do the stage play, I was to drop to my knees when the fighting starts. Then, still on my knees, exit stage right. I watched the play progress from the sidelines on opening night. The curtain came up for the restaurant scene. I was 15 years old when I played my tune as I walked around the restaurant. The fight started, so I fell to my knees, and there was much laughter as I exited stage right. As I put on the costume the next night, I noticed that my pants had split up the back. I mentioned this to the seamstress, and she said, "Oh yes, I forgot to sew them." Then I went on stage to do my little act, and the audience laughed again as I left the stage. On the 3rd night of the play, my pants had ripped again, and the seamstress was mending them. It was then that I came to realize that the pants were supposed to rip, and that I was the butt of the joke. Later, I joined the Amateur Composers League, a fancy name for a variety show staged at various venues in the Twin Cities. I now owned a 120 bass accordion and was an average player. The Amateur Composers League was putting on a show at a tuberculosis sanitarium. It was a large auditorium with a proper stage. My job was to play out front when the curtains were down, so they could prepare the next act. While playing a song on my accordion, I would raise my right shoulder once in a while, and as I did, the girls in the audience would scream. I didn't know why, but I kept doing it, and they kept screaming. Maybe it was tuberculosis therapy.
Tennessee Terry. My Uncle Terry, the guy I mentioned playing drums in an orchestra in England, was now in Canada and living with his wife and family in Port Arthur. My grandparents also came to Canada with Terry in 1957. I saw Terry on local CKPR television. He was playing bass fiddle in a country western band. The camera seemed to love Terry's smiling face as he was introduced as Tennessee Terry with his cowboy hat on. I couldn't hold back laughter as I watched my English uncle pluck that bass while the band played a Texas swing-type song. Later, I found out that Terry had influenced the band to tweak their music to a swing beat, which was typical of what my uncle would do. High school. I was 17 when I started high school. I failed grade 8 at St. James School and passed grade 8 at Prospect School. In retrospect, I would have done much better if I had taken home correspondence courses to improve my grades instead of trying to fuddle through classes with noisy class clowns. It's not as if I wanted to mingle with other students. I was happy on my own, but it was my own fault because I didn't open up to my parents. I held my cards close to my chest as most Aspies do. Now here I was with neurotypical teens, and I tried to cover my condition by acting like them.
I didn't know I was slightly autistic, but I knew I was different than other kids, and it wasn't an issue. I quite liked being different.
I also hated being behind a desk all day, and homework was a problem for me. In England, there was no homework, and I resented having to do 2 hours of homework after school and wondered why the teachers couldn't do their jobs properly. After school was my time, not the school's. Because I resented doing homework, I didn't do much. I would scan this and that, then guess at a few answers, and if I had to read a book, I would buy a classic comic book that outlined the whole story. It was just enough to do the book report for school. Later, I saw a notice on the board saying the school was looking for students to sign up for football, and I decided to join the school football team because I liked being active. The coach brought all of us, potential footballers, into a single classroom after class and outlined his plan to win the championship that year. At the end of the coach's speech, he asked if there were any questions, and I wondered whether the rules of the game would be explained. He assured us that everything would be explained, so I joined the team. The next day after school, the coach had us run a 100-yard dash on the track, and out of the whole team, I came in second. The kid who came in first was picked as a fullback, and I was picked as a halfback. The expatriate American coach explained his playbook on the blackboard with X's and O's. I had no clue what he was teaching, but after a while, I started to get it and realized that a 49-end run was where I received the ball. Then, it seemed like no time at all when I was on the field running with the ball in my hands. The ball was first faked to a proper fullback, then to the left fullback, then handed to me. There's a way to hold your arms when you're faking holding the ball, and that was how I ran down the field until I got tackled. Later the coach looked at me strangely and told me how to run with the football in my hands. He said, instead of bending over and pretending you have the ball when you actually have it in your hands, stand upright holding the ball at one side and dodge players who get in your way. Well, that would have been a choice piece of information for an English kid that knew nothing about the game, and for that matter, why is the game called football when you can carry the damn thing in your hands? I played a few games. I wasn't that good, but I did make a fantastic catch way down the field, and it was nice to see 8 beautiful cheerleaders dancing and flaunting themselves with my name on their lips, but it didn't last. I can't remember why I was walking down the long hallway during class. Maybe my teacher had given me an errand, but as I walked, I met a kid I knew and walked with him. I noticed the kid was smoking, but I was too cool to say anything. A teacher way down the other end of the hall shouted something, but we ignored him and kept on walking. The next day my mother got a phone call. It was the principal who said I was expelled for smoking in school. My mother knew I didn't smoke, and she got snarly with the German principal. Yes, my high school principal was also German, and my mother, having experienced the bombing of London, didn't like Germans at all. So as my mother was tearing the principal a new arsehole, I intervened and told her that school wasn't working for me. Then she said, if you don't attend school, you will have to pay rent for your room. At last, no more sitting on my behind in school. I was free from homework, free from my guidance counselor who told my mother I didn't stand a chance in hell of succeeding in life, and free from those class clowns who kept me from fixating on my work. The very next day, I got a job as a laborer at Robert's Plumbing. I loved doing physical work, and Robert made sure I stayed busy.